All right, we're going, but let me just rearrange this.
Okay, pen.
I might, Kelly, I'm gonna, you might see like your screen change with people because I'm gonna try and put council members up on top.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Yep.
So, okay, welcome everyone to our the council's February 8th Public Safety Committee meeting. What I'll do is, because people are still jumping around, JR, can you just call out the members of public safety and council members that are here?
Okay, so far with us, we have Councilmember Fahey, Councilmember Tom Hoey, Councilmember Igo, and Councilmember Conti, and Councilmember Kimbrough. That's all I see from the council right now.
Okay. There's a lot of folks there. 2 page. So, okay, those were the council members. I also just in general recognize that they're members of the CPRB here. APD folks are here. We got some representatives from, looks like ACPAC, Violence Prevention Task Force also.
Councilmember Ballerin's joining us.
Okay. As well as Dr. Green and Mr. McGee's also, Mr. McGee and Mr. Lewis, Officer McGee and Sergeant Lewis are also here from APD's 2 unions. Okay, so we're here tonight to talk about the police reforms. We had local law J, which we were making some changes to based on our last meeting. We were trying to button that up so we could pass it out of committee. And we were also going to take public comment regarding the police reform and reinvention final report there. So first we're going to do local law J, what we did was got together and made the recommended amendments from our last meeting, and put those in there. And so folks had a chance to look at this. It's been up since the meeting notice went out last Monday, so folks did get a chance to look at it. But what I would like to do is see if any committee members, public safety committee members, would like to make comment.
Kelly, I just want to make sure this is the one that was amended on 2/1. It says on the copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. This last week I wasn't updated. Thank you.
I am having trouble hearing. Okay. Let's see. So let's clear this out. So yeah, so that was Mr. Igo. So any other members? Mr. Conti, I mean, you kind of led in making the changes and the adjustments. We didn't really change it much from what we talked about last, but would you care to speak to?
No, I think it reflects discussion we had. It does provide that the Government Law Center, that contract will now be put out on a periodic basis. So it's no longer going to, I mean, the Government Law Center can be the administrative agency, but it'll open that up, clarifies some of the budgeting provisions in terms of CPR doing their own budget, really not having to come to the council for approval of anything, so long as it's within their budget. All the areas where you had the Government Law Center is now replaced by more generic administrative agencies. I think some of them were just technical corrections that had to be made. Some clarifications on confidentiality, I think. I don't know, JR, is there anything substantive that I'm missing?
So,
Sorry, trying to monitor the Zoom at the same time.
Okay.
Generally, no, there wasn't much substantial changes. It was a lot of it was in technical corrections and also removing government law center and replacing it with a more generic term and clarifying the budgeting process.
okay. So, okay, thank you. Any other, Mr. Igo, then Mr. Hoey?
Yes, JR, would you want to comment on the letter that Corp Counsel sent late this afternoon? Did everybody
Yeah,
see it?
I actually, it was my intention to, after we asked to shift and let Mr. Williams maybe speak for that,
Okay, good
that
enough.
office. Okay, Mr. Hoey.
Yeah, I just was concerned about Dr. Green's letter and how it impacts. I mean, we have a couple of things going on here. Does that letter impact Public Law J, which is supposed to be the reinvent? So I just had that question. I was a little bit confused because I definitely read her letter, and I think we need to discuss it. Thank you.
Right, and we'll do the Police Reform Collaborative after we get through the Local Law J conversation. The idea right now is, so if folks spoke or speak, it'll be for 3 minutes on Local Law J.
Excuse me, can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Sure. Mhm.
My name is Paula Bailey. Do you have me as an attendee? As a meeting attendee?
I see you and I see your name, so I'm assuming that
On your list of invites?
Michelle, I'm not sure without going through.
Ms. Bailey, can you chat with Ms. Andre and we'll get to that issue.
Did you say that there's a police reform meeting after this meeting that you're having?
It's the second part of this meeting is to discuss the police reform stuff. The police reform collaborative reports. We're taking public comment on that. Okay?
Yeah, for public comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because the email I received said 5:30 for the public comments.
5:30. The meeting starts. We talk through and have a discussion, and then we get to public comment. We're dealing with Local Law J right now, so let us get through this, and then we'll head into the conversation about the police reform and reinvention collaborative.
What time does the public usually sign in?
Public signs into the meeting as soon as we start, typically.
So right now there's like 50 other people from the public?
No,
Sign in?
no, there are people from the police department, corporation council, council members, the CPRB, there are different groups, violence prevention task force there.
What time do the people from the public sign in?
You can sign it.
Sign
Everybody
in.
from the public is currently in now, but we're not taking public comment at this present
Just
time.
yet.
We'll announce when it's time to accept public comment.
But they're already signed in right now?
Yes, everybody is signed in right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, so where was I? Okay, council members. And I asked for comment from the committee, public safety committee members. I can't see any hands. It was just Mr. Hoey before. So with that, I will move on to Mr. Williams.
I don't know if there were other council members that had comment outside of committee members.
Yeah, I put that out there. I don't see any hands. But there's like 2 screens and I can't. Anyone, JR?
Councilwoman
Doshett.
Doshett just
Councilwoman
raised her
Doshett.
hand.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Are you calling on me now?
Yes. Yeah, and JR, can you manage that? 'Cause
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I just want to note that there were a couple things that I thought needed a little clarification on this. near the end, before it talks about CPRB findings, it talks about the chief being able to not being able to impose any discipline until there are determinations made by the CPRB, or if they decide that no discipline is necessary. And I think that there's something else in there that is also a little unclear to me throughout the document, in terms of, does this imply that every single complaint that is referred to the CPRB, that they must make a determination on each and every one of those complaints, and either their determination is no discipline or reaching a determination regarding discipline? The reason why I ask that is, I think that things, for example, that are referred to mediation, where there might be, that choice, or the CPRB might decide that there are things for which it might be appropriate for there to be discipline, but it doesn't rise to the level of them conducting a complete investigation and review, et cetera. I don't know exactly how this all works, but it struck me as though we might want to minimally add an option that, or the chief has received a letter from the CPRB, making a determination that they do not need to complete their review, or that they will not be doing a review in advance of disciplinary measures being taken by the police chief. So that was one thing where I thought that there was a little bit of a ambiguity in it. And the other thing is, when we talk about the matrix, it talks about the CPRB establishing the matrix in the first sentence of that provision, and then it talks about the police chief shall make the final determination with regard to the matrix. And my gut reaction on that is that those provisions are internally in conflict, and there should be some sort of clarification of how that is handled. If the police chief indeed is supposed to make the final determination, I do think that it's appropriate for there to be some sort of escape clause, or ability for there to be a higher level of review regarding that, because if the chief adopts something that is inconsistent with discussions and guidance from the CPRB, then the CPRB are bound by that matrix that the chief has then adopted separately. So that was those were the two things that I wanted to bring to people's attention that I think maybe could use a little bit of tweaking.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. And just, I'd like to just point out that we made those changes to try and get, to the point where we could move ahead and get this out of committee. But that's not I just want to state that that's not the end in terms of amendments and editing. I mean, if we pass it out, we could still do the tweaks to the law without substantially changing it. Just I want people to keep that in mind. Okay, so Mr. Hoey.
So are we, Judy brought something up. Are we gonna, to me, that's major. Are we gonna try to fix it before it leaves committee?
I mean, we could have.
I just want to clarify real quick with the discipline matrix portion. That one is to provide a community input portion. That's why the chief still has it, because in the end, as the collective bargaining agreement still states, the chief is the only one who can institute discipline of that nature, but the discipline matrix allows for the CPRB to work collaboratively with the chief on a form of and a matrix, so to say, but the chief is the one who has the ultimate say. In terms of the first issue that Councilwoman Doche brought up, it's a matter of if it's brought before the, if it's a matter as if it's brought up before the CPRB, that then the chief will institute a discipline until the investigation by the CPRB are done, because typically it goes through OPS. And basically with the way it's being restructured, it's a dual investigation, OPS and the CPRB. And so therefore, if the OPS is done, but CPRB is still working on their investigation, it has to wait till CPRB is done.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to, I appreciate that clarification, and I would love for you to take a look at that language and just see if maybe that could be made a little bit more clear.
Sure, if you could just direct me, and I'll tighten it up if I can.
All right.
Okay, no hands. Mr. Williams,
I believe Councilwoman Frederick just raised her hand.
Yep, she does.
oh, yeah,
So to that point, if we, so tightening up that language, I think the description as JR stated now seems to be, favorable, or at least what we were aiming towards. So we could still vote this out of committee, correct? And make the change after. Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
All right. Shall I?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So Maurice's email is referring to what's been an ongoing legal fight over the changes Rochester made with regard to what they call their police accountability board, which mirrors in a lot of ways what we're trying to do here. Their police accountability board had, under its enabling statute, had probably more powers than ours does. And as Marisa mentioned, it was really sort of the first of its kind in the state and one of the first of its kind in the nation. But almost from the time it was enacted, in 2019, there's been ongoing litigation regarding it. And that litigation is looking at a few different issues with regard to their statutes, some of which we foresee being issues with our statute as well, the way it's currently written. I have a big sheet of notes here. I'm just trying to work through. Yeah, so part of it does have to do with the disciplinary authority that we've already been speaking about a little bit tonight. One section of particular concern to me is, I think it's section 42-343A in our statute, which states the CPRB shall have the power to conduct independent investigations as necessary, et cetera, and the power to discipline officers if a complaint of misconduct is sustained, excuse me. The most recent decision in this Rochester string of cases has said that the CPRB or the Police Accountability Board can't have that sort of exclusive authority over discipline. I know we have a matrix we're talking about, and the chief retains some say in the disciplinary process here, but under state law, the Taylor law, and a few other statutes, the court said that the Rochester Common Council acted ultra vires when it enacted local law 2 that contradicted the civil service law and the Taylor law by putting disciplinary authority strictly in the hands of their police accountability board. So as I said, it's that one particular provision that concerns me, where it says that the CPRB shall have the power to discipline officers. That's a process that needs to involve the commanding officer or other members of the executive, be that the mayor, the chief, superior officers within the police department. That's a process that can't just involve the CPRB. So that was one concern. I have a concern as well, or we have a concern. regarding whether putting that sort of disciplinary authority into the CPRB's hands would be effectively removing that authority from the executive branch or the mayor, which is something that would require a referendum to have done. And I think as well, a referendum could be required here with regard to the budgetary stipulations that have been worked into the CPRB here, although that may have changed since the last draft. But in any event, I think a referendum is probably necessary in order for this to be passed in its current form. And even with a referendum, I think that language I referenced before may have to come out, giving the CPRB sort of unfettered disciplinary authority. Any questions regarding all of that? It's a pretty long court case, so if the council wants something in writing to that effect, I'm happy to work on that and provide it.
Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, this is a bad hair day for me hearing this. Local Law J is the last of the police reform that was ordered by Governor Cuomo, is my assumption. I could be thinking this wrong.
Yeah, that's we're doing that stuff as a council. Their recommendations and reforms, which they do fall into the governor's executive order, I believe it's 203. But it's in line with it. It's in the ballpark. But that's what we're doing here. Well, it is the reform. It's separate. I think, and of course, we've been our efforts here have been informed by the process that's going on, the collaborative, all the groups, and the report, and all of that stuff. But they're the same, but at the same time separate and apart. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but will we run into trouble April 1st where he'll defund us if the laws aren't put through? And that's why I'm just a little bit concerned. I mean, we did the first two reform, legislations, they passed, but this was the last one, and it was a key part of it. So I am kind of concerned, do we push through,
No, Tom, we don't have to. I mean, this local law J, it'll be attached, but the governor's executive order says you have to have a plan, right? So we could say part of our plan is restructuring our CPRB,
okay.
which is what we're doing in local law J. So on April 1st, even if this law doesn't pass by then, we can put in that plan, restructuring CPRB, and call it whatever, giving it more independent power to da-da-da-da-da. That would be part of the plan if we don't. So yes, we just have to have a plan.
Right, and but also again the process with the different groups for the police reform that produced those reports, that's got to be converted into a plan or developed into a plan. Again, it's a part of it, but it's not. And I know I keep saying that, so maybe it doesn't make so much sense. But we're doing what we can do as a legislative body. We're not doing this because we were directed by the executive order. We're already heading in this direction and working on this stuff. It falls into and works in that reform. It works towards those reform efforts, but it's not dependent on this passing.
Okay,
It's
thank
one
you.
piece of legislation. Ms. Frederick, I thought maybe I saw your hand up.
Yeah, so my question is, given this information about Rochester, do we have examples of other cities or comparable municipalities where they successfully implemented disciplinary action in a way that wasn't contradictory?
What I'd like to do is, because the CPRB helped us out with a lot of this stuff, and they've done some research themselves. Ava, would you care to weigh in?
Sure, thank you. So for anybody who doesn't know, I'm Ava Ayers. I'm the director of the Government Law Center at Albany Law School, and we manage the CPRB. I've also been, I was the co-chair of the working group on the Albany Collaborative that did the section about the CPRB. So I'm wearing sort of two hats. Yeah, on Rochester, no, as Mr. Williams said, the Rochester board is really the first one in the state that has given disciplinary authority to a civilian police oversight board. So this is the only example that we have. I think it's important to emphasize that the litigation in that case is, we're currently waiting for a decision from the 4th Department, the appellate division. We only have a trial court decision. I saw the 4th Department argument. My sense was that they're likely to rule in favor of the union and against the CPRB, but my opinion isn't worth anything. I was an appellate lawyer for 9 years, and my prediction is worth garbage. So please don't. I learned that in those 9 years. I do think it's important to know that the rules in that area, the issues in that case, are very specific to Rochester. The basis for the trial court decision is that Rochester sort of used to have the power to, its local legislature used to have the power to legislate how police discipline is going to work. But because of the way they've had their history of local legislation and dealings with the union, they've given it away, is the Supreme Court's view. So in general, yes, you can give it away, but in Rochester, no. Unfortunately, my guess is we're not going to get a clear answer for what that means for Albany. Even when the Rochester, I could be wrong about that, but I think we may not know. And so and I'm happy to try to write this up as well in my own analysis in a way that would be helpful for people. The law is incredibly complicated. What I do think may be helpful to know is that in Rochester, they have a law that gives bargaining power to the, that gives disciplinary power to the Police Review Board. And during the pendency of the litigation, that provision of the law is just sitting there, not used. It's not like they're going ahead and doing it and violating people's possible union rights. So if, speaking as the person who currently administers the CPRB as a staff person there, if you all approve a provision that says the CPRB has disciplinary power, the CPRB is not going to just start doing it despite the union saying it's unlawful. There will be a process for working that out and dealing with it, which might include going to the collective bargaining table, right, where the city says, we're going to try to work this out collaboratively rather than through litigation. So I'm not sure if any of that was helpful, but I guess the answer is it's complicated and it certainly can be worked out. The other thought, real quick, for if it's useful, just to speak to Mr. Hoey's point about the governor's office and the defunding. I was on a conference call with some folks from the governor's office last week where this question came up about, do we have to pass legislation by April 1st that implements the reforms, or is it enough that we have a plan that sort of says we intend to do reforms? And the governor's office was hesitant to answer that question. My sense was they want to push people to try to implement things and make change happen as much as possible. I certainly think that if you survey the different plans that are out there, and the Government Law Center has just put up a page that links to all the existing plans, which I'll send to John Raphael so he can share it. We just put it up this afternoon. If you compare the other plans, some of them are much more specific and some of them are much less specific in terms of how much real change is happening right away. I certainly think Albany has done a really impressive job. And just as a footnote to that, the CPRB reforms that are in front of you all right now emerged out of proposals from the board itself. The collaborative and the working group had a whole bunch of other proposals on top of those, which I hope the Common Council will still consider. But I certainly think all of that adds up to a pretty impressive set of accomplishments compared to a lot of other municipalities do. So if the governor's office is going to start defunding people, they certainly shouldn't come to Albany first. That would be my view.
And if I could just follow up quickly with Ms. Ayers' comments. Yeah, I think from Corporation Counsel's standpoint, we were looking at the Rochester litigation, looking at the legislation they had, which gave rise to that litigation, and looking at our own legislation and trying to see what the parallels were, what the parallels weren't. And as Ms. Ayers said, it's complicated. It's up in the air right now. That's only a trial court decision, which wouldn't technically be binding here in Albany County. Frankly, neither would a Fourth Department decision, but it would carry more weight. So yeah, it's a little bit wait and see, but we're just trying to look out at what issues this legislation could be facing in a courtroom if it comes to that.
It's complicated. That's the best
Yeah.
way to summarize.
I know that's the lawyer answer, but
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
I saw Mr. Igo's hand go up.
I'm just wondering if it's a little bit cleaner, just cleaning this up, leaving it out till Rochester gets some sort of decision, because at the same time, our unions don't have a contract, and when they do, they will probably end up wanting to negotiate this. Just food for thought.
Any other?
Chair of the CPRB, Mrs. Vivas.
Thank you. I just want to add that as we know, as it's been stated in several different ways, this is complicated. But the CPRB, as Ava explained, we came up with these proposals based on what we heard from the community, based on what we felt ourselves was right to do, and reimagining the powers that the CPRB had. We're not looking to Rochester or what happens in Rochester on what needs to happen in Albany. I think it would not be a good thing to leave out the discipline part. I think that is very important to give the CPRB teeth, as we talked about in several meetings, that the public has been calling for decades now. So Rochester, pending litigation or not, the CPRB, at least, like Ava said, we may need to go to the CBA bargaining table, or we may need to go above that and go to the state legislature and ask for a repeal of the Taylor law. But we do not see ourselves boxed in any way by what's going on in Rochester, and we implore that you don't impede the progress and what can be for Albany based on that.
Okay. With that, we're rounding out the first part of the meeting where we discuss local law J and make a decision on that. So members of the committee.
Well, Marissa did say she's not leading us into not passing it. She's just pointing out some facts to us. So if she feels that, doesn't feel that strong on it, I'm willing to go ahead and keep it in there if that's the will of the committee.
Okay. Ms. Frederick.
Yeah, I'm in favor of keeping the disciplinary action in the legislation and moving it out of committee for a vote. I do think we could make some of those changes that Judy discussed with JR after the fact, but would it make changes after that?
Second.
Was that a motion, Ms. Frederick?
Yes, with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor in the committee, aye. Say aye.
I didn't get to make my point.
Oh,
I can't even see you.
I've been waving my hands.
What I don't have two screens, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's why you have to use the raise your hand buttons and stuff, people. I know it's, I hope some of your computers do have it, but that's why we need it, so we can see it pop up, just in case you're not on camera.
Well, I've been having issues with my computer ever since they cut off my power today. So
Gotcha.
there's no other issue. What I wanted to say was on this specific issue, we spoke about it at the last meeting. We're speaking about it today. I think what we need to make sure we're doing is being very clear with everybody that even if this language is kept in the document, it does not mean it may be implementable. I think as long as we're being honest and transparent with that, so that we don't give any type of false hope or false illusions of what is being moved forward, I can be comfortable with that. And I think we've had a good conversation about it today. We've spoken about all the complexities of it as it exists. So I think that's important because we don't want people to leave here thinking that the document is finalized, even though it'll be finalized in the fact that it'll be voted on. It's not finalizing the fact that not all of the provisions are 100% enforceable at this time. And I think as long as we've done a good job making that clear to everybody, I feel comfortable with that. And I do think we have done a good job because we had this discussion at the last meeting as well. And we've had a good lengthy discussion about this today. I just want, that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ballerin. Yes, it is important that we make that clear. We've been discussing those points, and I think folks from who are in the room kind of get a sense of where there may be sticking points and where there may be issues and changes may need to be made. But we'll go back to Ms. Frederick. Do you want to go do that again, and we can move forward?
Yep, I motion to move local law J out of committee with a favorable recommendation.
Second,
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
aye.
Aye. Okay, so that looks like it's unanimous. Thank you. So it passes out of committee with a positive recommendation. So thank you, everyone, for your input. Again, just remember this is a work in progress, and we'll keep you updated as we move along. So with that, I will shift now to the main part of this meeting, the report, the police reform collaborative reports. We're going to be we received a report from the administration and the chief February 1st, and we've been going through it. And this is basically the council's effort to take public comment and hear from the community as well before proceeding. We will have another meeting on this topic. This isn't it. What we're going to do is have this meeting, take some public comment. We have a phone line where folks can leave public comment. Also, we'll have to get that number up so folks can see that also. So between this meeting and the next meeting, you can call in also, and we'll put that on our Facebook page also. And you can call in and leave public comment for the council also, which we'll have a chance to review and hear from folks that way also. So with that, again, in keeping with, but you know what, you guys want to take just jump right into public comment to get people moving and hear from people and not
Kelly,
focus so much on council members. Mr. Igo?
I think a lot of people like to know, what's going to come out of this 95 pages. There's a lot of great suggestions, okay, but we aren't going to do it. And who is going to put it into what kind of format? Saying this is our plan. You're just going to say, is it possible it just come out like this? I don't,
Yeah, and I would agree with you. It's not a plan, and we did have a discussion earlier today with the mayor and her folks regarding crafting more of a plan and with some benchmarks and budgeting and ideas, more of a plan. Because again, it's a report with a bunch of great and most excellent suggestions, but it's not a plan.
This was a great piece of work getting through. I mean, some of it touched my heart really with the homeless and everything, but I just don't know how it's going to be put forward. I think her staff has to be involved.
Well, absolutely.
And everything, and just drafting something. I don't know who, there's different people did parts of this. If you're going to call them in or whatever, but that's my concern. I think everybody has the same question in their mind. So.
Right, right. Okay.
Thank
So what I'll do is we'll just jump right into the public comment. And I will call on Dr. Green to get us started.
Kelly, let's set a time limit so we can make sure everybody.
Yes, 3-minute time limit. Okay. I know it's a lot to get through, but we have a lot of folks that want to speak, and in order to get to everyone, we'll do that. And again, this isn't the only meeting, and it's not the only way to get your comments to us. You actually sent us some letters and some stuff on your thoughts, but I'd like to hear from you, Dr. Green. You're muted.
How's it? Am I mute? Is it okay now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. The Center for Law and Justice really deeply appreciates the work of all the volunteers on the collaborative who contributed to making Albany a safer place to live for all our residents. And we sincerely thank them for their service. However, although the collaborative members have done everything asked of them by the city has not completed its responsibility to transform the recommendations of the collaborative into a plan that reinvents policing in Albany. And prior to this meeting, the Center for Law and Justice submitted extensive written commentary for the Common Council to consider regarding the particularities of the report submitted by the city. Today, in this meeting, we confine our remarks to two very immediate and pressing concerns. And I think some of you have already noted it. First, the following statement appears on page 3 of the report, and I quote, "The collaborative asks the Common Council to adopt our report at the February 8th, 2021 meeting of the Albany Common Council Public Safety Committee meeting," end quote. The term adopt in that statement clearly indicates that the committee is expected to vote on the report tonight, on February 8th, 2021, allowing insufficient time for the community to react to the report. The second thing, and more importantly, what has been submitted thus far does not on its face fulfill the mandate of Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 23. The executive order states, quote, "Each local government entity which has a police agency must develop a plan for the purposes of addressing the particular needs of the community served by such police agency," end quote. What has been submitted this far is a set of recommendations with no indication regarding which of those recommendations the city is committed to fulfilling. A plan requires goals, objectives, implementation strategies, projected target dates,
15 seconds.
required
Dr. Green.
resources, and a proposed budget. So the Public Safety Committee should direct the city to submit a plan to reinvent Albany policing for the Common Council's consideration. Collaborative members collectively have already done a yeoman's job, volunteering countless hours and tireless effort in providing everything the city has asked of them. The center suggests, I almost finished. The center suggests that the city staff assigned to each of the collaborative's 5 working groups be tasked with producing a draft that transforms the collaborative's recommendations into a plan with goals, objectives, implementation strategies, projected target dates, required resources, and a proposed budget. And once the draft has been produced, collaborative members should be invited to review and revise it if they so choose. The governor's mandate requires Albany to produce a reinvented policing plan for the city. The Public Safety Committee should not vote on anything less. Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Dr. Green. All right. I have not received any messages or raised the hand, but I believe Miss Bailey, you would like to speak next? Yes. Once we unmute you, then we can start the timer.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect.
I'm a new resident of Albany since October last year. I live in the Kennedy. And my only comment is, as Governor Cuomo said, that, the area needs to be safe in order for economic recovery. So I just want to say that I don't feel safe living in this area, especially like going out at night to go around to North Pearl Street. I don't want to be discriminatory, but sometimes when I walk to Walgreens on North Pearl, then I come back, there is like a homeless man sitting on Van Trump Street, and it's very scary. So, it's like when I leave the house, I don't see any homeless people. And then when I'm coming back, I just see like all these men close to the corner of North Pearl and then on Van Trump. And it's just very scary. So I just want to know, like, is there anything like being done to make the place safer, especially after the sun goes down? Because so even like now, at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, it's dark.
Ma'am, if you want to send me a private chat with your information, I'm Lieutenant Joe McDade. I can have a B cop reach out to you directly and see if he or she can help you with your problem.
Say that one more time.
If you want to send me a private chat with your information, I can have a beat officer, a neighborhood engagement unit officer, actually reach out to you directly and see if they can help you.
Okay, okay, this is my first Zoom session, so I don't know who just spoke, or if I'm not familiar with chats and communication because I don't have any friends or associates. Okay. So can you like send me your email or your phone number?
Michelle, you received her contact, right? We can forward her.
I can forward that to Joe. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't use those communication tools because I have no one to use them with.
Sure, I supervise the unit that can actually help you directly. So I'll get your information from Michelle Andre and I'll have someone reach out to you in the next day or so and see if we can help you.
I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Next we have Greg McGee.
Good evening, my name is Greg McGee. I'm the president of the Albany Police Officers Union. Just to follow up for the public comment on regards to local law J and the police reform. I know last week we discussed about it. We do understand that this is a difficult time and we are not opposed to police reform. However, there are certain things that do govern us, CBA being one of them. So in regards to the Rochester case, I believe it was Mr. Williams and Mrs. Ayers that touched on it. We believe in that case that actually does apply here to the city of Albany. So it's kind of that section in the local law J, it appears it's going to be opening up the city as well as the union to a lengthy litigation battle. I believe that hope we can, through collective agreement, discuss this, maybe work on it before the implementation. I know last week there was also a question in regards to if this law is enacted, would it in fact supersede our contract, which is not correct. The local law would not supersede our contract in this case. In regards to the sections in regards to final say and discipline, like I said, the discipline matrix, that all is very clearly outlined in our collective bargaining agreement. The issue of collective bargaining does come into question because of the PBA decertification at this time. So before we can even get back to the collective bargaining table, because our current contract governs us still, it could be quite some time before we actually do get to the point where we could collectively bargain in regard
Mr. McGee, you muted yourself.
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
I think so. I was just saying that in regards to the collective bargaining, we are some time off from collective bargaining because of the PBA certification attempt. So it is unknown at this point. I do not have a good time frame of when that could possibly be, but we do believe that through the collective bargaining, this would all have to be brought to the table in regard, especially some of the issues brought up in police reform collaborative working groups. I think, like I said, there's certain sections of our contract that are govern and protect us, as well as the Garrity rights, our constitutional rights. So I believe that this law and some of the police reform are going to open the city up to a lengthy litigation battle. I'm just hoping that at some point we can discuss this so we can possibly avoid the lengthy litigation. Thank you.
Okay, I don't receive any chats. Let me see if I see anybody waving their hands. I don't see anybody. Any more public comment? Oh, I see Miss Hilly. Here you go.
I just have a question because usually we do this in a different order and I get to hear what the council members think. Since I was in the collaborative, I'm kind of interested in their comment. Would it be possible to open up again to public comment at the end?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, then I'm going to reserve. I'm curious as to comments from people that weren't on the collaborative. So thank you.
Okay, so with that, I'd like to hear from first the committee and then, okay, so JR, are you catching that?
I saw Tom go first and then Richard and then Kathy. That's how I saw it come up on my screen.
Okay, you got it.
So, yeah, I was concerned, and I'd like to have a little bit more dialogue with Dr. Green. I felt bad we had to do a time limit, but I want to hear more what she would like us to do. Is she still around or?
She is, but it looks like she stepped away from her camera.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll jump off till she comes back. But I really do want to question her. I mean, I read her letter and it was, there was a lot of stuff in there. I'm just wondering, how do we address what she was bringing up? So I'll shut up for now.
Right, and so we'll let folks talk and then we can go back to that. But Mr. Hoey, I don't know if you noticed, and we got an email from Dr. Green with recommendations or comments on each section for the collaborative that we received. It's in your email.
Yeah, I read it, and that's what I'm wondering. How do we implement, or do we discuss it? I just like to know what we're going to do about it, because I am concerned, and I think some of the points she brought up were legitimate. So,
okay, thank you. So we'll get through the members, and then we'll get to that.
Richard?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost in a way following up on Danielle's comments, because ordinarily we would, when we're considering something like this, we would have someone, the person maybe who was the chair, presenting the report and recommendations of the collaborative in summary form to the council, giving us an ability to have some back and forth with whoever was the chair, et cetera. And then having that discussion and then, getting the public comment on it. And it seems we're not doing it that way. And maybe because I'm not quite clear who the chair is, and every different work group seems to have a different format in terms of how they did their report, et cetera. And I'll note the report also was kind of difficult to find on the website. unless you knew where to go and find it, because it's not highlighted up front on the webpage. So if people heard the collaboratives out there, they go to the city webpage, there's nothing on it. And you have to kind of hunt to actually find the document. So there's a little bit of a, transparency issue there that I think needs to be corrected also. But, this kind of lends itself to a section by section or work group by work group review and discussion as we move forward. Certainly that's not going to happen tonight. And so I'm more, just like laying out some procedural issues or concerns in terms of how we're going to move forward. And of course, the whole issue as to how we actually implement this, which are there local laws, ordinances, resolutions that we need to adopt, and how does that work as we move forward. So there's a lot to discuss that's not clear right now tonight in terms of how we want to move forward on this. But it is probably one of the most significant issues that's going to be coming before the council this year or in the entire term of this council. So we want to make sure that we're deliberative, that we maximize the opportunity for public input and comment, and really go through and then also understand how is this going to be implemented, how is it going to be adopted first, and then how is it going to be implemented, and what are the benchmarks for moving forward. And that's a lot to do between now and April 1, which theoretically is our deadline. Just observations.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Conti. Just real quick. So I got a suggestion from you to try to pull the different chairs of each group, which makes sense, or leadership of the groups to come and maybe talk to us about their work. And then we can ask questions, and then the public can hear that, and we can go back and forth. So we'll make those arrangements for our follow-up meeting to this one.
Yeah, and I also just think that the report itself has to be made more visibly available on the city website than it is right now.
Hi, Councilmember Conti. So when I received your email earlier today,
yes, that's Jasmine.
Yes, so that was corrected. It's now at the top of the website.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that.
Okay, and then also just through discussions with the mayor and her folks earlier today, the idea would be for us to, because obviously in order to break this out into different pieces of legislation, resolutions, laws, the thing is actually resolutions won't really get us much because it's just a feel good kind of thing. We need ordinances or local laws, but the idea was to try to craft a plan based on this and then have us through either resolution or ordinance adopt the plan. But that has to be put together for us to do that. And ideally, once that's together, we could have maybe a final discussion on adopting that. So, but we did talk about that today. So back to members speaking.
Councilmember Fahey's next.
Thank you. Well, I understand we're going to be going through the different work groups and recommendations, but I did want to bring up an important omission that was brought to my attention, and it has to do with the recommendations from the Civilian Oversight Work Group and references to the ACPAC group and how it should function. Because ACPAC has been with us for quite a long time now. I was trying to find the first year, I think it's 2015, that it was formed. And it's this group really does represent all parts of our city because each council member is in charge of designating an individual from their ward. So it's a group that reaches all parts of our city. And so their purpose is to ensure community policing remains strong here in the city of Albany. And my understanding is, talking to Joe and Jimmy, who was he's the chair of ACPAC and he was on the Civilian Oversight Group, that they are really looking for maybe additional support in the way they function and maybe even codifying their role because just like the CPRB, they have an important role. So does ACPAC, because they do kind of keep community policing at the forefront in everyone's mind, and they also make important recommendations regarding policing and different procedures. So there's concern that this important role that ACPAC has needs more support. And how we go about doing that is something that needs to be discussed further. And it's right now it's missing. That aspect is missing from the recommendations in these civilian oversight recommendations. So I don't know. We'd like to see that addressed.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm glad you brought up ACPAC. ACPAC is not a constituted body by this council. So when we're looking at part of the plan, we could put in, we will look at restructure and refunction of ACPAC. It's not a constituted body. So as council members, any council member can start taking that on and starting to, build it however people feel. And that way,
and I do understand that, Corey, and I do think that that should actually be a recommendation, that we look at legislation with regards to ACPAC.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Ballerin.
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Green and Councilman Conti that we definitely not ready to vote on this today. I didn't come into this meeting thinking that we would be. It's a lengthy document. It's 95 pages. It's not as big as this guy, but it's still something that we need to make sure we take our time in going through the sections. I like the idea of having the insurers come in and maybe have a meeting just specifically on one section per sections, so we can have good detailed dialogue about those sections, and as well as also have input from residents about those sections, specifically those sections, so they can give us their detailed concerns or thoughts. I haven't gone through the full document for full transparency. There are some things that I, have some questions on that I like to get clarification on, why some of these recommendations were made that, I don't 100% agree with. So I think it's good for us to bring these individuals in. They've put a lot of work into this, and they've done it in a short period amount of time. So, we definitely appreciate all of those efforts. And I think this is the beginning of the conversation, and I look forward to it.
Ms. Frederick?
Thank you. I also agree with having the individuals come in for each work stream and present and really have that open dialogue. What I'm still not clear on is twofold. Who is going to actually develop said plan? Is that council responsibility, or is that individual leads, or is that the mayor's office? And Kelly, I know you mentioned that a couple times, but just wondering a little bit more detail there about who's actually doing that. And then two, what is actually due April 1st? Still not clear to me exactly what we need to have on paper just to make sure that we don't lose any funding associated with this.
Brett, just real quick, a plan. I mean, the plan based on the executive order comes from both the executive and the police chief. So the plan's going to come from them, and we're going to approve the plan. That's the intention. As far as time, and remember it's a plan. As far as time, actually, if we were going to get it by the April 1st deadline, we'd have to act on it our second meeting of March, technically, and that's like 2 weeks before April 1st. If that's not feasible and we have to do a special meeting between, I think it's the 15th or the 18th of March, between then and the end of the month, we're gonna get it done. That's not an issue. It's just we need a plan. We need more than just the reports to make a decision on. At
So
this point,
can
we don't
that-
have a plan to vote on. We don't have
Mhm.
anything to.
Could the plan be as simple as like we are meeting with the work stream leads to further develop specific legislation based on their recommendations? Or does it have to be that we have to meet with each work stream lead prior to the plan? Because that's where I'm thinking about that time as a factor. And having 6+ meetings prior to April, it's getting a little tricky.
Yeah, and I don't see it being 6+. We're gonna have to double book and try to squeeze some of them together. I know that's a lot, but Mr. Pichardo.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify for everybody, the April 1st deadline is that we just have something like either resolution or local law adopted, and that we certify to the Division of Budget that we have done, a look through and that the executive has followed through. That the executive order isn't too clear on exactly what they're looking for. But as Professor Ayers has said, and even myself with reaching out to people, there really isn't much clarity on it. But I will say that the collaborative that our city has done, honestly, our city is eons ahead of other municipalities in terms of getting this done. I believe Troy, our cities next door, just actually announced their members for their collaborative maybe a week or two ago. So just to give you a heads up where other people are.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Okay.
Just to expand on that quickly, if I may, I'll read you what the executive order says the plan should consist of. It to follow up on JR's point that it's pretty vague. It says we have to develop a plan to improve police deployments, strategies, policies, procedures, and practices for the purposes of addressing the particular needs of the community served by such police agency, and promote community engagement to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy, and to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. That's pretty much the extent of what the executive order tells us our plan has to consist of. So it's, as JR said, pretty open-ended.
Next, I see Ms. Doche, Councilwoman Doche.
Thank you. My first question, I think, is to Mr. Kimbrough. Maybe it's to Mr. Williams. How did the request that this body adopt this document as our quote unquote plan by today, how did that come about? Was that voted on by the entire collaborative group? Or did somebody else insert that in there as an intro to it? Who's asking for that?
I could say I'm not sure. It kind of caught me off guard also. This page 3 of the document where that request was made. And discussions with my group, I was in one of the groups. I don't recall us collectively, requesting that. I'm not sure where it came from.
Mr. Williams, do you know?
I'm afraid I don't, Councilwoman. I can look into that for you, though.
I would appreciate knowing how that particular very specific request came about, because it strikes me as odd given the product that we are now looking at and the then expectation that there wouldn't be an opportunity for additional public input. So I would really like to understand more about that background. I'm struggling with this. A lot of great ideas, great recommendations, a lot of thoughtful dialogue, analysis went into this document. It is a little hard. Different sections are a little harder to read than others because of differences in formatting. and you don't know, in some cases, I'm a little unclear when it's a heading for the discussion of the topic or where it's a recommendation and a finding. So I'm hoping that before this is adopted, that kind of issue in terms of consistency and format and clarity is going to occur in addition to there actually being a plan. Now, here's my problem. We're talking about bringing in different people to talk about the recommendations. It would be really great for us to actually be talking to the public about and getting input on the actual plan, which is what we are supposed to be adopting. And while I appreciate, so I think we need the actual plan from the administration like yesterday, so that we can have a meaningful dialogue about what it is that we are supposed to be adopting, since we're not supposed to be adopting this report as is, we're supposed to be adopting a plan. And I think that there's general agreement that there's not a plan. So it would be helpful to have discussions on what we actually intend to adopt and are being asked to adopt, as opposed to adopting this particular report. I also want to note, with all due respect, that I am interested in us doing as much as possible to actually have a plan, not have it be vague. I mean, there are some significant issues in terms of what Mr. Williams read with regard to how do you address inequities in how people are treated, and biases, et cetera. I think we all agree not enough is being done along those lines. We shouldn't be waiting and saying, oh, we met, the public did all this work, this collaborative group did all this work, made all these recommendations, and now we're going to kick the can down the road with regard to when things are actually going to be implemented. We should be implementing all of it as soon as possible. And so that's just my opinion in terms of, I'm hoping that we have a plan. I'm hoping that there's specific actionable items. It doesn't have to be necessarily that all the legislation that is needed is adopted, is drafted and then adopted, but to have a clear idea of a timeline for when we want to be tackling different legislation, who's responsible for drafting it, and what will be the process for getting additional public input on some of that legislation. Finally, I want to note that pages 41 through 43, I thought covered ACPAC. And it starts out, one of the first recommendations is ACPAC's mission and structure should be recognized and clarified in legislation enacted by the Common Council. And it has a lot of other details there. So I'm a little bit confused about if people could look at those pages, 41 through 44 really, and be ready to provide the council, I think, via email with thoughts about what needs to be supplemented with regard to those particular pages. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Kelly, that's all the council members. That had their hands raised.
I know Joe and Jimmy would like to speak. John.
Right, yeah, no, and that's what I was trying to find myself. I had to switch screens. Mr. and Jimmy, since we missed you earlier when you mentioned you wanted to chime in about ACPAC when Councilmember Fahey was talking. Let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you. First, I understand that there's an awful lot of work that has to be done by both this committee and the council as a whole. I just wanted to clarify one of the things that first Kathy Fahey mentioned and then Judy Sean alluded to. There was the recommendations that come from at the beginning of this report from the city are a summary. And I would recommend that you go back and look at the more detailed recommendations from each one of the work groups, because that's where there was a lot more detailed information about some recommendations that were discussed in the civilian oversight work group. And those recommendations were included in that report. But I understand that, you know, to do a summary, and it's what the city was trying to do, they can't include all of that. But when it comes to making these changes or making recommendations for changes, you're really going to have to look at each one of the individual work groups' specific recommendations, because they detail the discussions and the input that was received from the community on those issues. And that's specifically in terms of ACPAC. I would like to see some work done on ACPAC in the future. And again, I understand, you have a lot of priorities and a lot of issues to deal with. It's just that we'd like to have that as one of the issues to be considered. Again, going back to the work group's recommendations, in addition to just the summary that was put in the front. That was the clarification I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tandra?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I just want to revisit, and thank you to the council members. I want to revisit Councilman Conti and also Dr. Green's comment of working with the chairs and having the chairs of the work groups come and do a presentation. And also I strongly support the collaborative chairs working with the city of Albany to do a logic model of plan of action for the plan and to be able to present that to the common council. I think that's very helpful. We did spend, I think someone mentioned, it's almost close to 300 hours of work as collaborative members and also chairs. I myself chaired with Ava, the civilian work group. And I appreciate Councilwoman Judy, your last name, comment about ACPAC and the recommendations that were put forth. And I think it's important that we also stay focused on coming up with a plan of action, and that the collaborative members that have been doing those 200 or 300-hour work members, especially chairs, are included into that part of the action. So that's my comment that I want to make. And thank you.
Lillian? I don't know if that's. I'm trying to unmute, but I'm seeing no response. Ms. Hilly, do you want to come back?
You can let Lori go. I see her hand up.
I'm sorry, Ms. Shanks, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a suggestion. I also was the chair of the Police Functions Working Group, and I think that the report part of it is that because there was a very, very limited time to get all of the reports from all of the different groups together, I think that Jasmine and Brian did an incredible job of trying to get them into one document. But it is a tremendous amount of work. And I think that just as a practical suggestion is maybe instead of trying to have 6 different meetings with everyone, perhaps if 1 or 2 of the council members could be assigned or volunteer to meet with some of us in, with the individual group leaders, we could flesh out what our recommendations were designed to do. Perhaps you could help us in terms of knowing, do they need a resolution? Would they need, and perhaps the gentleman from Corp Council could do the same to say, do we need a new law? Do we need a budget impact statement? Do we need a resolution? What is it? That we did not try to do that. What we tried to do in my group, and I think that the other working groups tried to do, is to identify problem areas, identify potential solutions with respect to the charge given by the governor and by Mayor Sheehan, and to work obviously with, Dr. Green was very kind, gave us input. We had other members from the community give us input. We worked with some of the other different groups where we had overlap. And I think that if we had an opportunity to meet, perhaps outside of the whole Common Council meeting, that might be a practical way to both give you information and give us an opportunity to clarify anything in the report that wasn't clear.
Thank you for that, Ms. Shanks. Did we get Lillian on? Lillian, you there? No.
Nothing over here on my end.
Okay. Any council members?
I think Danielle was going to go next.
Okay.
If there's no one else that wants to speak, then I'll go.
I don't see anybody else.
Okay, so I do understand. So I co-chaired the SOP working group. Our group was very different than the other ones because we were actually working with an already written document and making recommendations that were directly related to what already existed. We weren't actually, we weren't creating, say anything, but we were adjusting what was already there. So, and I do understand there are some formatting issues in our section that we can probably get cleaned up. But I think that for like our group, and don't get me wrong, I'd be very happy to do a sit down with the council. And I have to disagree. I do think that it should be done with the whole group that's interested in, like, the whole public safety committee. If it has to be 6, then it has to be 6. I'm concerned with rushing anything or with it being misunderstood when relayed from one member to other members, because it's very, very important that we do this right. A rushed and improperly done resolution is, in my opinion, potentially worse than delaying a resolution to get it done correctly. So I would be, I'd be happy to spend that time going over the things that are in our report. I think that, it's a huge document. I haven't been able to read through the whole thing, so there's still more that I have to. There's stuff that I have concern about. I've heard the comments on ACPAC, which I have great concern over, given the fact that I don't think that it's actually helping communities of color who don't actually seem to know it exists either. So You know, we really need to take some serious stock in the decisions that are made, so that we don't just continue to promote tokenistic type committees for, you know, people to sit on. But you know, since it's not this whole thing isn't something that needs to be done by the 1st of March, I think that time can be taken to really figure out in each group what needs to be done. And I would hope that council members take that time to come up with a plan that benefits us long into the future. And that really takes the ideas and puts them together and, you know, gives us a police department that looks more like what the many members spent hundreds of hours working on. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Danielle. But what I think needs to happen is when we talk about plan and moving forward, I think Ms. Shank said your idea, I mean, while it would get, you know, greater input and we'd understand as a council better what the group's plan, it's just not practical. It's not, because we're saying, and it'd probably be someone that's a part of the public safety committee that would have to meet with the different groups to try to get to that. But what in my opinion, what I think needs to happen, and we had a brief discussion with the mayor's folks earlier today, is that the information that is presented, we can all understand it. I mean, the recommendations, we see them for what they are, but it needs to be converted into something workable with timelines, budget, and things of that nature. So I think the discussion and the work converting what we're being offered into this plan, for lack of a better word, I know we're beating that like a dead horse now, into a plan needs to be done by the administration and the mayor's folks. They need to take this, convert it into workable solutions with timelines, suggestions, dates for implementation, some reporting requirements, and so on and so forth. That's what needs to happen. Because right now we're having a discussion basically about us creating a plan. When the work groups have been working at this for the last couple of months, putting a lot of time in to this. We need a plan. We need some ideas about how this is gonna get from this paper into action in the Albany Police Department. That's what we need. And as much as I want to be a part of it, and I'm sure all of you do too, as council members, I think we're going to have to respectfully ask that the mayor and her folks get together and convert this into something workable for us to actually have a discussion about. That's what makes the most sense to me. So any thoughts on that idea?
Couldn't have said it better, Kelly.
Joe?
I agree with you, Kelly. The only thought that was coming through my mind is how much we had to put together. And if that was the case, maybe within each committee, they could prioritize some of their suggestions. You know, a dozen, half dozen, whatever, there's so many out there. And put those in a time frame of what has to be done and what can be done short, you know, on the fast lane. But I like your idea though, letting them put something together. I mean, like some of those people are so familiar with it, they could just go through and prioritize right there, you know?
Yeah, and there's low hanging fruit, and there's some stuff that we're not going to get to because of budgetary issues in the near future.
State law, this, that, and everything else.
But the goal is to put the plan in place, saying this is what we're going to do by this date, and again add some reporting requirements in there for reports with updates to the council, that type of thing. I think that's probably what would be best. Mr. O'Shea and then Mr. Johnson.
I completely agree with you. that we need the administration to put together the plan for us then to be sharing with the public as required in the certification that we're required to sign per the executive order. We need to, it specifically says the plan has been shared with the public. And we don't have a plan that we're sharing with the public at this point. We're pretty close, but we don't have that. And with regard to that, I'm hearkening back to the mayor's transition report when she took office, in which she had a transition team. And essentially it took action items and put it in essentially immediate, interim, and long-term. Frankly, I think nothing should go in the long term, because I think that whatever is done, we should be looking for implementation within a year on this. And we obviously need the plan now for us to be looking at those kinds of things. So I just wanted to share that about the transition report, very specifically broke things down into different timelines for action items. And I think, you know, at the beginning of each chapter, perhaps there could be a table that lists specific items that need to be addressed and the time frame in which that's going to occur. And that would begin to be the actual plan for it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, I just had a brief question. I heard it mentioned that it was conversation with with Troy, I think it was mentioned, but are there any other areas that are farther along than us? And if so, has there been any conversation to see if they're doing anything different than us? And, you know, if it's something that we could do better. So that's what I would like to know.
I'm going to defer to Professor Ayers on that one, as Albany Law School has done a whole thing on it.
Sure. Thanks, JR. So yeah, we've actually the law school's been collecting draft plans as they're put up for public comment. And I just emailed JR so he can share with all of you our webpage, which produces links to each of the draft plans that we've seen so far. I can't say I've had time to go through all of them myself, but we're also holding 2 roundtables. The first is tomorrow evening at 6, where folks who've been involved in these collaborative processes from different municipalities can hopefully get together and share experiences and ideas. I'll send that information to JR as well, and certainly any members of the council or the public who are interested in participating in those are welcome. My sense is that, as folks were saying earlier, people are in very different stages of the process. You know, I think the Albany group, these recommendations cover everything from the budget to the philosophy to what's painted on the side of the police cars. I mean, this is an extremely far-reaching, widespread set of recommendations from each of these different committees. And, you know, implementing legislation is going to be a truly monumental task. So, you know, whatever, speaking both as somebody from the law school and as a working group co-chair along with Tandra on the civilian oversight working group, whatever we can do to be of use to the council, we'd certainly love to do.
Thank you. We see any other hands? Okay, and so, and just thinking about reforms, again, Mr. Hoey was mentioning local law J earlier, and I was saying it's separate and apart. But we did local laws HI and J, which were police reform reforms. So certainly that could be a part of the report that we or a part of the plan that we send to the state regarding reform. So that definitely should be a part of it because it falls in that area. But at this point, I don't believe we have further comment. So we're gonna schedule our next meeting a couple weeks out. We'll let folks know. I will have a discussion with the mayor and her folks about trying to put something together for us to actually discuss. I think that'd be most productive because the way we're going about it, even if we had the time, I don't know that it'd be effective for us to go through with each group. And because in the end, we're not, while we're accepting the plan and supporting the plan, it's not necessarily our plan. So that's where my head is and my thoughts are on it. Oh, excuse, stupid watch. So if there is no further comment.
Could I just make one
Mr.
comment?
Becker?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've heard people refer to a 95-page proposal recommendations. I think there was a newer one with 102 pages. So I think everyone, just to be on the same page with each other, all the council people and other members, they should try to pull down the latest version of the, I'll call it the final draft report. So the one that I have is 102 pages. Thank you.
And I would imagine that the copy that most members have, because we got some printed out copies, have 95 pages, correct? So we gotta update our versions of that. I'd certainly have to do it. I made a book and I have the 95 pager, which I'll have to update. So if
I'm going to wait for the plan before I print out anything.
yes, that'd be a good idea. Thank you for that, Judy. So if no one has anything further, I move we adjourn. Okay, members. All
Is
right.
there a second?
Could I say one thing before you leave?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to remind people that the governor's asked us to redesign and reinvent policing. So it's not just a matter of putting together a bunch of recommendations, but I think people need to keep that in mind. That's the whole purpose of that mandate.
Okay. Thank you,
But-
Dr. Green.
But I also add real
go ahead,
quick.
Tandra.
I just want to add that with that and redesign, it is focus on communities of color. And I just want to make sure that we are making sure that that is the purpose of this. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Kelly.
Right, and and again, this has been a long time coming, and some of this stuff is pretty. I think some pretty good reforms. I think I would argue, having worked in law enforcement for many years, that I'd say this is reforming and reimagining with some of the stuff.
Yeah, I think he's also talking about transforming, also talking about systemic racism. So those things have to be there. You can't just put some things together.
Right. Thank you again, Dr. Green. So with that, I'll make the motion. We adjourn. Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Good night. Be safe, everyone.